Hi, welcome to the latest episode of our podcast where we talk about clean air and navigating the crazy world of parenting during COVID. I'm Isara,
And I'm Lisa.
and we are both just normal parents trying to find our way in this crazy world we live in and doing the absolute best for our kids. I'm sure you are as well. So today, Lisa and I wanted to react to a lot of things that happened this week, and just to recap a few of these things. So we're going to get into the Violet Affleck criticism from Loose Women. That was super interesting. There was a really important study that came out, Lancet, and reported a lot of other places on the long COVID risk of kids. The CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, has a big change in their messaging, which we wanted to react to. There's a story going around, and basically the TLDR is schools are saying it's too expensive to clean the air, so we're going to talk about that. There's something that's going on with Clean Air Allies and youth activism that I'm personally very excited about. And then we also wanted to react to the UK COVID inquiry, module 8, which is going on with, and the topic is children and young people. So, yeah. Lisa, do you want to kick us off with
Yeah,
what's been going
sure.
on with this Violet Affleck thing and loose women?
In the UK, there's a program called Loose Women, and this is what one of the loose women had to say about Violet Affleck's awesome speech at the UN last week.
Affleck and Jennifer Garner's 19-year-old daughter Violet appeared in front of the United Nations in a mask and goggles. We're asking if you're worried about your child's health anxiety. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, pretty special, huh?
Yeah,
I mean,
pretty
it's
special.
really like I'll reference Greta again, which was exactly what I saw with Greta. She would come prepared and basically will just spit out just basic facts, just facts. And nobody who criticized her would ever react to any of the things she said. They were never debating on substance or merit. They were just all these ad hominem attacks. And I was like, okay, well, look, like, sure. But like the way it works when we have debates is you attack is like we engage with substance, right? And it's really just the same script with Violet. It's just like it's crazy to see it honestly because like like we all live in the real world, right? Like when you have conversations and people tell you things, the way normal people react is you react to things people say. But apparently with like just these pundits, just bizarre human beings, is they're just like, well, blah, health things, and you're just like, okay, well, it literally has nothing to do with what's going on, right? Like, there's just no like, here, let's look at what she said, let's break it down. We're going to attack this and this. There's just none of that. It's just like they have nothing to stand on, and I think that's one of the most amazing things to me is it's really like has nothing. There's no valid criticism, and it really just reflects on who they are as people and their understanding of the situation, their priorities, and everything. So I was just like, to me, it was exactly the same as watching the criticism of like Greta. And you can say what you want about her and her parents' choices and all this kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, like she's making arguments that are based on reasoning and logic. And if you want to attack it, attack the content. But nobody does because they don't have a way to do it, So I don't know. What did you
This
think?
this is really disturbing to me because here you have a young woman, 19 years old, super bright, at Yale, works for David Petrino's lab at Mount Sinai, knows about long COVID, has a post-viral condition herself, which she contracted when she was young, and so she's got clear opinions about what kids might be feeling like when they get older, should COVID tear them apart health-wise. And I think she's doing an awesome job. And I think it's really bizarre to me to have a bunch of grown women who have absolutely no idea what's going on with the science call this health anxiety. I mean, that's just a trigger to try to get people to talk about something. But this is clearly not health anxiety. This is a very smart young woman who's standing up for what she believes in, much like Greta did. And go Violet. I think this is a very disturbing situation that we're in when grown women are picking on a young woman who knows what she's talking about and pretending that she doesn't. It's really just gaslighting.
Yeah, I think like I think my person like I think I might differ a little bit from some other people. Like I don't I'm really stoked on what Violet's doing. And I know with Greta, like I'm definitely like a stan. I followed Greta for a long time and I really felt like she was like very like had a lot of integrity and just was honestly just demonstrated a lot of like personal courage and like leadership and stuff. With Violet, like I'm happy and I'm really happy. I don't have any criticisms. I'm really happy. I think I need a little bit more time until I'm like a full on maybe Violet stan, and I try not to put too much faith and confidence in people and like leaders and faces of like organizations and movements just because people are fallible, things can happen. It's so unpredictable, so I'm not like as all in as I see a lot of people online are just like, yeah, Violet, I support her 100%. Like, again, I have no criticism. I think what she's doing is incredibly courageous, and I really appreciate everything she's doing. I to me it's just really simple. Like, let's debate the merits of what she's talking about. Like, I don't even care her background. I don't even care like what her credentials are. Same with Greta. Like, she's a kid, but whoever speaks, like, let's deal with the merits of the debate. Like,
And
let's
that's
deal with
that's
the
just
subject
it.
matter.
You've got
You
people like
know?
Megan McCain who was saying she's a nepo baby. So one nepo baby calling another
Oh,
nepo baby a
dude.
nepo baby. It's
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
look,
you can't get more nepo than Megan McCain. I mean, let's be honest.
well,
Like,
the thing
what?
that the
What
thing that
is?
strikes me is I don't really care who her parents are. She's making really great points. I think she's a
Yeah,
very bright young woman. She certainly cares about the issue and has educated herself, and she's using a platform that she was given uh, by virtue of having famous parents to talk about things that really matter to a lot of people and to educate the public on something that's a major issue. At the end of the day, I'm a real big supporter of that. And everyone's fallible. I don't think we should like create false idols or whatever, but so far, I've been very impressed with Violet, and I've been a big fan of what she did the other day. I actually tweeted this after this week's UN call. I really feel like we should trend ultraviolet, which is
yeah.
actually
I
incidentally
I know
a
you're like more in like all in than I am, which is totally cool. I respect that. I dig it. I like when people are like, I know me personally, I'm not there yet, but I
fair,
get
totally
that, like,
fair. I just think that like you should buoy people who are trying to talk about things that matter, and
yeah,
she's certainly trying to talk about things that matter.
yeah, totally. And again, she's just, I don't know how you can criticize somebody for demonstrating that amount of courage to go up there, say these things, these difficult topics, advocate for very difficult things that really nobody wants to do. Again, like the whole like Megan McCain thing was just like so amazing to me. It's like, dude, what have you, like, do you have any leadership in this area except for just like tearing people down? I don't know. You do your thing. It's a free country. You can say what you want. You're free to talk crap. We're free to talk crap back at you. That's the beauty of democracy and free speech. So, whatever.
To your
But
point, sorry, I think people should just be talking about this stuff, right? Right.
yeah,
Whether you agree with me or don't agree with me, I think we should all talk about it and understand that we all have different opinions. But at the end of the day, children don't have any agency, and I think what Violet's saying is right on. So
yeah.
I don't know. Meanwhile, you've got the New York Times finally sort of starting to come round, it seems, to reporting on this
Let's get
study in the
into
Lancet.
this, dude. So, just in case you were like me, so the I like to trace back to the original source because the way reporting works is there'll be a study, and then somebody will report on the study, and they'll be like maybe get 20% or 60% of it right or wrong, and then somebody else will report on that report, and it's just a game of telephone. So, like, 5 articles in, you're like, whatever. So I like to go back to it, even though I'm not trained to read science as much as Lisa is. But with the Lancet, they don't really have things online. You have to download their articles. So if you need to do that, go to Lancet, you can download it. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa sent it to me. Awesome. But yeah, what did you make of this? Like,
Oh
ah,
man, there's a lot to unpack here. So first, um, I'd like to point to something from a really interesting guy, Dr. Michael Lynn. And Michael Lynn is a fascinating guy. He's a professor of neurobiology and bioengineering at Stanford. And I think he broke this whole thing down really well in terms we can all understand. So, I hear a lot of people on X saying stuff like, oh, well, long COVID in kids is only like 0.2%. And that's not very much, which is fair. But in this case, what's kind of interesting is that Michael has pointed out that there may be a long COVID risk floor on repeat illness, which is a bad floor to have. So basically, what he's saying is we don't know why. The good news was, according to Michael Lynn, was that the the rate at which they found long COVID on the first infection in the study was a little lower than what people had thought. But on the second infection, it was 2 times higher than the first. And this, I think, study ended, um, the subject matter is ended a long time ago. So we don't really know what the current state of affairs is. But the notion is first infection is one thing, second infection doubled the risk. So the question that we all need to be asking is, okay, so what happens next? How many times is the next one going to double on the third infection? How about the fourth infection or the fifth infection? And there have been some interesting graphs circulating on Twitter for adults, but there's really not been much on kids. And so Michael's point is that it's unclear why the long COVID or PASC rate on the second infection is higher than the first. It might be the strain that's causing the issue, or it could be that the second symptomatic case already sort of selects for a bigger inoculum or weakened immunity. And the main thing here is if you look at what these different symptoms are, the repeat symptoms are most commonly things like myocarditis, loss of taste and smell. Those particular loss of taste and smell are, uh, as I understand it, oftentimes associated with things like Parkinson's disease in later life. And this has been my main concern for these kids is we're treating this like it's no biggie, like it's just a common cold. And yet there's a notable increase in a lot of these things. And as Michael says, all bad things and not previously things that we would accept a 0.2% rate in for millions of kids each year. So if you look at all these different symptoms, that's the thing that really concerns me.
Just the 0.2% thing, I think, like, is crazy. Like, I could be wrong on my stats. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems
Nope.
like if none of this existed, and we were just talking about something like smoking, like secondhand smoke, and there was a 0.2% rate in some of these things from secondhand smoke, I'm pretty sure we'd be like, that's not acceptable, right? We'd be
Pretty
like,
sure you're right.
that's a lot. We should not do that. But to his
Yeah,
point, we're like, okay,
now we're
basically
doing it.
now
Now
we're
we're
doing
doing
it,
it.
guys.
And the thing that really bugs me about all of this is just looking at all of this last year, Dr. Al-Ali, Zayed Al-Ali, who's an amazing long COVID doctor, was talking in what was it? It was the conversation about how those who'd been admitted to the intensive care unit for COVID had a 9-point loss in IQ. Those who just had a very mild infection had a uh, 3-point loss in IQ, up to 3-point loss in IQ. And those who had a reinfection with the virus, they basically got another 2-point loss in IQ. And so I look at it like this. You're sending your kids to school so that they can learn and grow and socialize and become better people and that they can become fully formed adults. But if the air is not clean in school and they're getting repeatedly infected with COVID because the air is not clean in school, then what is the goal here? Because then you have an entire generation, or in fact, multiple generations of kids who are growing up to sort of take one step forward only to take two steps back on the neurological brain function front. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't
I
get it.
mean, yeah, I I agree. I think, the way I've always approached it, because I've been maybe hyper conscious of my own limitations when it comes to reading like really hard science and cell microbiology and how viruses work. I just don't have the training, so I just take a completely, like, to me, sensible approach, which is just think of it as like map the risks and then figure out how to not assume those risks, and to Dr. Lynn's responses, he brings up like, well, we don't know some of these things, but it doesn't look good. And you're like, okay, well, maybe let's not roll the dice until we have really firm answers on these questions. Like, to your point, and this was one of the things that came up early with the pandemic, and I think what a lot of people struggled with, was the concept of like, like probability of long COVID, and that it's essentially not a coin toss, right? So if you're tossing a coin over and over and it's a fair coin, which means it'll go, heads or tails either way, you can't predict it, then each time you toss it, you have a 50-50 chance, right? Well, COVID is cum- cumulative, right? Like the damage that it's doing. And
Yeah.
so, like, as far as I can tell, this has not been contested at all for the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years since they figured this out. And when you look at these graphs, it's like, oh, your risk of long-term damage increases each time. So it adds on. So if the risk is whatever, 5%, like on the low end. So the studies I've looked at are like, well, 5% on the low end to maybe 13% to maybe 20% on the high end. But if you just take the low end, you're like, okay, well, your first time you get it, your odds are 1 in 20. Second time you get it, your odds are 1 in 10, you know? And then it just your odds approach like 50%, 60%, 70, 80%, and then you're pretty much just guaranteed to have some kind of long-term damage. And so you're like, dude, like, is this the thing that we want to be doing, with our
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah. I
Like,
actually asked a senior official, public health official, that question, and they chose not to respond to that question. The question was essentially, Dr. Al-Ali and several other serious scientists all are talking about the cumulative risk. And do you think that that risk will be capped at some point? Or do you think that at some point, pretty much everyone just ends up with long COVID? And after a very respectful dialogue back and forth, that conversation stopped with that question. And this was shortly after California released its isolation guidance. It's very disturbing to me. Like, again, like we were talking about earlier, it's like just have the conversation. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying let's have the conversation and not be closed about the possibility that what we're doing here is a really bad idea. I'm a management consultant by training. I understand risk. I'm not generally risk averse. I've lived in multiple geographies in the US, multiple geographies internationally, and like I'm not like a risk averse person generally. But when I see something where the mechanisms very clearly point to a dangerous situation, I'm reminded of my childhood living in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, where a lot of the people that my family knew and people that my parents worked with, there was a large number of people who ended up with HIV and didn't know that they had HIV until they started developing AIDS. And that is a scary thing to think about. The thought that you could get something and then feel totally fine. You had a little cold, no big deal. And then 15 years later, you end up having no T cells left or, whatever it is, and you just don't function properly and then you die. Like that to me is like the scariest part of all of this is that possibility. And not to be a scaremonger, but like, let's hope that doesn't happen. But, let's not pretend like everything is totally fine either. I mean, one thing just to throw out there is that I hope I don't bludgeon his name, but Mike Horger from Tulane, who is the head of the Pandemic Mitigation Collaborative, he's a really interesting guy. He's a wastewater guy, and he looks at all the wastewater and he's a clinical health psychologist that talks about and scientist that talks about risk. And he pointed out with the study that came out that here we are where long COVID has surpassed asthma as the number one chronic condition for children. And I guess my question is like, how much longer are we going to accept this without doing anything at all to try to mitigate it?
I think it's a perfect transition to let's actually play the clip from the UK COVID inquiry I sent you because I think that just really you just teed that up so well.
And if we scroll down in the same document, page 3, paragraph 2.2, we see that Dr. Shamez Ladani joined the discussion to explain research into long COVID. And I'd like us to look together at the 4th bullet point under 2.2. I hope that that will be zoomed in on very shortly. The last line of that bullet point notes, Dr. Ladani was clear that children should not be labeled with long COVID, i.e. a medical condition, as this has potential to cause longer term psychological harm. Ms. McFarlane, what is your reaction to reading what was advised by the representative from Public Health England?
It cut me to the absolute core when I read that. That's the representative that should be representing my child and the other children.
Bingo.
And he he says label, I say diagnosis, and without a diagnosis,
Yep.
our children were unable to access care or to be believed, and that put additional pressure on families and children, young people themselves. It, it brought additional stigma. It makes me wonder if they wanted a barrier to stop our children being diagnosed because they didn't want people to understand the amount of children that were getting sick.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I watched that and I was just like, holy shit. I mean, people have been through the just the ringer, you know? And if you have no context of what this is, so the just to sort of recap my American non-understanding of what's going on in the UK, they are doing, as far as I know, the only COVID inquiry into their government's handling a response, and it's been going on for years. And you can find clips, you can watch it. It is like literally the best like thing you can ever watch. It's just like popcorn. Like you just grab your popcorn, make it a drinking game, whatever. But it's these people, they get up there. I mean, not this woman, obviously, but like I would say like a combination of like people who made horrible decisions and basically still continue to stand by those horrible decisions, even though they're just reading facts to them, you know. Um, and then people who have been like injured, like victims of these, decisions is amazing to watch. And I've
Really
watched a
is.
lot of I've watched a lot of these clips, and you're just like, wow, like they got these people on camera saying crazy stuff. Like one of my favorites was like they were like, so you really are still gonna tell us, sit there and tell, there's like some expert in something that
Industrial hygiene, I think it
yeah,
was.
yeah, like this surgical mask, which was not designed to do the thing, versus like an N95 respirator, which was totally engineered to do the thing, that there's no difference between these things. And like any person with eyes in their head can look at these things and be like, these are not the same thing. That one looks a lot better to me. That one looks a lot worse. And you have this like, whatever, she was an expert, and she's like, yeah. And you're just like, holy shit, how do you have a job, lady? You know, like yes, you'd be qualified to make me a cappuccino or something. I have no problem with that, but like dude, you should not be doing what you're doing at all. And maybe possibly be in jail. I don't know, it seems like you might have committed some crimes. Again, this is not legal advice, but like you're watching just as a normal person, a parent, and you're just like, yeah, UK, like yes, you fucked up, yes, your policies are awful, but like man, this inquiry is like pretty badass. I wish we'd have it here.
Yeah, there's a lot of CYA going on in that at the moment. A lot of people who seem to be very concerned that they might not have been giving the best advice and they're now trying to cover themselves. That poor woman that we just saw, I can't
Yes.
even imagine being the parent of a child who has such tremendous disability as a result of all of this. But I can tell you that I have seen um, so many parents absolutely lied to about the possibilities of unmasking your children. And the thing is, and sending them into a poorly ventilated space. We just don't know what the future holds, and we never know what the future holds. So I understand the idea that, you might not want to like think about that, but getting these kids repeatedly infected and being okay with it because no one else is saying anything is the very thing that we as parents are supposed to warn our children against. Like, well, if your friend jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge? And what I'm learning is that for 99% of people, the answer actually is yes.
Yeah.
It's
I,
disturbing.
I don't know. I watch this, I have so much empathy for people who've been harmed and gaslit and lied to, and seeing these people just not have any consequences at all, professionally in their career or anything. It's just very, I'll be honest, I get very enraged when I see these things, because I like to believe and hope to believe that we live in a world with consequences, where if you've signed up for a job and your job is to protect people and you failed at your job, there should be consequences. And that's what people sign up for, is that there are consequences. You didn't just sign up for doing a nice thing. And if you fuck it up, then, well, okay, like you're forgiven. No, not all jobs are the same. If somebody fucks up my cappuccino, sure, it might make some crazy Karen, pissed or whatever, but like it is not the same as fucking up, like knowingly or willfully or whatever. Like your job is to know these things and protect people and take responsibility and fall on your sword, and that is your job. And your job is to face consequences if you fuck up, and that is the nature of some jobs. And I'm sorry, but people don't look at these jobs that way, and that's what those jobs are. And
Well,
so, you know,
to use a phrase from Violent Affleck's speech, it's the neglect of the highest order. And I personally question when school administrators don't follow public health guidance. That is neglect. And I question at what point it turns into abuse. If you see that a child is a vulnerable child and they're being put in an impossible situation where they have to choose between their health and their education, that's completely wrong. I understand that we can't control everything, but at some point we need to say, all right, here are reasonable things that we can do to mitigate the risk. And I think CDPH has really set out some reasonable things we can do. I'm not like fangirling on CDPH entirely. I do think that their messaging has been a little bit hit and miss around things like vaccines are great, but like then what? I know a lot of people who are feeling discouraged about wearing masks because no one around them's wearing masks. And you and I talked last podcast about this. It's really hard being the only one. And I really feel like public health ought to be giving people not only permission to protect themselves, but also encourage them to protect themselves and others. We have to decide, like, you know, are we comfortable with the possible outcomes for our children that this brings without any mitigation? Um, and I do
let's
think that neglect of the highest
let's
order for sure.
yeah, let's back up. I think you did a great job of teeing up this next segment. Just for some context, CDPH is, if you're unfamiliar and you're watching this, CDPH is the California Department of Public Health. Lisa and I live in California, so we pay attention to our state's health messaging, and we are not alone in expressing a lot of criticism over the last 5 years, which is that they basically focused exclusively on vaccines and nothing else. And as I sort of, and they had a shift in their messaging about 3 or 4 weeks ago, that kind of shocked everybody who's been following this topic. And I posted about this, my incredulity and sort of my personal take on this, which was that since RFK basically banned vaccines, like effectively for the most part, that they had no other leg to stand on, and they had to actually start putting out other things. And those things that people have been asking for a long time were like messaging around respirators specifically, and not just using the word mask, which any normal layperson, I mean, they should know by now, but okay, it's the general public, you have to dumb it down. I get that.
Meet them where they
Mask.
are is what it's called,
Yeah, but
Ashara.
sorry, meet them where they are. Sorry, there's a reason I don't have these jobs. Is that anybody can interpret that to mean like a cloth mask or whatever, which doesn't really prevent, viruses if you inhale, whatever. And so they're promoting like specifically N95 masks, like in their stuff for the first time. I mean, we're 5 years into a freaking pandemic.
To be fair, it wasn't the first time, but it certainly was in a way
The
that was most socially appropriate and
the
acceptable.
the ratio, like
The
if you were to
ratio has
list
improved.
out all their messaging, like for the last 5 years, the bucket of like vaccines is like this, the bucket for like respirators is like this, but now they're like, and I'm like, okay, like let's go. I'm very pleased that they're actually mentioning N95s for like literally the first time. I mean, I know maybe not the first time, but as far as I can tell, as a layperson seeing their stuff, I'm like, wow, they actually know what this word means. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Let me show you something they put on today, which I thought was interesting. Your body heals best when you slow down and give it time. Bonus, staying home keeps germs from spreading to others. Other tips include test and treat if you have symptoms, wash your hands frequently, and stay hydrated. For more tips, here's where you go.
When the doors opened and I saw him, I thought, he's so familiar to me.
So yeah, they're sharing it in conjunction with Love is Blind, and I do think there might have been a little joke in there about how when I saw the door open, he was familiar to me. Kind of reminds me of something. Isara, could it be the thing that no one talks about anymore out loud? Could it
The C
be
word.
the C word?
I
Probably.
I I have to admit I'm a little conflicted. On one hand, I feel like they're still to some degree that my textbook example of people making easy things look hard, you know? Like, and if there's one of the things that just drives me crazy in life, it's like people like you don't have to make things like easy things look hard. You can just do the easy thing, you know? And it's just like basically dragging them, kicking, screaming, just sending like clear messaging. So like on one hand, like as a person who writes copy, who loves well-written copy, who has a background in advertising, I'm just like, Jesus, like do better. So I do have like criticisms. On the other hand, I do feel happy that they at least have some character and personality and they're making and they're trying. Like I feel like they're trying at this point. Like
Agreed.
and if you're watching this and if you work there and if you have insider story of like what the hell is going on in the CDPH, please, we'd love to get you on here and just talk to you. I would love to know. I mean, I suspect there's somebody who just fought this and they just got fired or like overruled by their management after 4 or 5 years, and they was like, dude, sorry, we actually have to do the thing, you know? So I don't know what's going on over there. Clearly, I feel like they're giving like they're not leading with their best and brightest. You know, they're probably giving a lot of this to their interns. I don't really know. I'm speculating here, but I'm happy overall, and I've been really pissed for a long time. So I'm still keeping like an eye on them. Still kind of skeptical. Still have them in the people making easy things look hard bucket. I would love to make them move them over. I feel like I'm kind of getting warming up to the idea that they might be able to make easy things easy or even make hard things look easy, which would be amazing. Still not quite there, but I'm definitely warming up and I have a good feeling about this. What about you?
I'm hoping. I'm hoping that they finally have gotten the picture. Although I will say that it disturbs me that we are now over the hump, or like at the top of the hump, kind of moving over the end of the hump for this particular surge, and it's coming out now. Like maybe this could have come in a little bit handy, like say 6, 8 weeks ago, when the Pandemic Mitigation Collaborative was actually showing that this was going to be a problem. And I think warning people that there are things, or not warning people, but letting people know that there's something you can do to prevent this before it
No.
happens rather than making it seem inevitable and now you got to stay home and watch Love is Blind. Like here was my take. It was a cute gif and I think they're almost there, but they missed the key part, community care. Half of the spread with COVID you can't see, so test, mask, clean air, that is the key. Sacred positive test, don't be a jerk. Keep kids at home and stay home from work. Don't let it spread. If you need to, stay in bed. At the end of the day, this is the kind of messaging. I'm not saying they need to come up with a stupid rhyme, but like, come on, people. Give people permission to care for themselves and care for the community. This notion that you only have to care about yourself is really what has gotten us into this mess. And the removal of encouraging testing and these tests being so expensive versus in Europe, they're so cheap. I mean, you can get a PCR quality test at your house in Europe for something like €6,
I
right?
mean,
You
here's
do a whole
here's
test in your house.
yeah,
It's
but
so cheap.
here's the thing that drives me absolutely bonkers. We're talking about critical medical infrastructure, right? Why aren't these things free? Like I don't care about cheap. I care about like I drive down the street, I see some people who, whatever, look homeless, unhoused. I see people who clearly, are, trying to make ends meet, feed their kids, whatever. Is anybody going to are any of those people going to spend whatever, $4 or $5 for like an N95 that you can wear for a couple days? Does anybody spend $20 for a test that's probably going to tell you it's negative? Like it is bonkers to me in California, one of like the richest state in this country, and we could overnight, if we had to, like in a wartime, we could mass produce things, get them out to the public, wouldn't be an issue. Why aren't these things free? I don't understand. it is insane to me. California could produce, and the other, like, we have smoke, we have fires. We need masks, people. We need masks.
We
The
need
air quality,
respirators.
we need respirators. Thank you. The air quality gets insane. If you don't live here in like California, you've never lived through like a forest fire. Believe me, I've lived through many, many forest fires at this point. I'm from California, I've lived here a long time. The smoke can get absolutely insane where you can't even like get out of your house or your car. Why aren't we producing quality N95s for adults and children of multiple ages? Like, this is what we need. I mean, honestly, if you were just going to run for political office as governor and that was your only platform, I would say 100% I would vote for that person. I don't even care like what they're into aside from that.
Yeah, but you're forgetting, Asara, that like there are people who didn't quite get the memo on how this all works. So I would suggest, like in the school district that we are assigned to, when the kids had been wearing masks for a long time, it got to a point where parents were just frustrated. And it is hard to wear a mask all day. And so I hear parents' frustration. And then an article came out that basically said that masking children, it was a JAMA article that said, some negative things about masking children. And they presented that to the school board, a letter to the school board, on the same day, or actually, this article that they presented to the school board had been retracted um, prior to its delivery to the school board because it wasn't true, and they found a lot of flaws in this thinking. And unfortunately, the school board didn't know it had been retracted. 60 some odd parents wrote to, I think it was 60, wrote to the school district and said, this is an issue and you shouldn't make kids mask. And then they spent a unfortunate amount of time at that school board meeting discussing whether they should lobby CDPH for anti-masking, which, I mean, it's just like, this to me points to problems communicating the value proposition of some of these things, right? And since we don't know that people are contagious somewhere around 50% of the time, we're unfortunately in a situation where clean air doesn't solve every single problem. If you really want to maintain your health, wearing a respirator plus having clean air plus testing regularly is an important thing. But a lot of people didn't feel like, I think to use a term that I saw somewhere, the juice was worth the squeeze. And I think the problem was that they didn't think about the long-term implications of those decisions. And we now know that masking, when done properly, when you fit test, when you use the right sized respirator, when you find something comfortable that works for you, prevents infection. I am a testament to that. My family is a testament to that. But I'll tell you, socially, it has not been easy. And we need to let people know there are other options out there besides getting sick all the time. And to your point, respirators should be free. In schools, they should be free. At work, they should be free. They should be encouraged. It should be like you wipe your nose when your nose is running. Here's a free Kleenex at the office. This is the kind of thing that should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, like, leaving aside COVID, if COVID didn't exist and we are dealing with, increasing climate change, which in California, if you just can read a graph with your eyes, we're going to be getting more fires every single year. There may be like a two steps forward, one step back, and someone's going to be like, "See, one step back, the whatever." But if you just look at the graph with your eyes as a normal human being, we're going to be getting more fires. Well, anybody with a quarter brain in their head knows that like breathing smoke is really bad for you and your kids. Like, this is critical medical infrastructure for our country. Just leaving aside COVID, like, entirely, like, this needs to be something that is provided for everywhere. Like you're saying, it's just a part of when you come to California, you should, and you go to public spaces and libraries and wherever, like, there should be just respirators, pick your size, and like, it's just how it works. It's just so, I mean, the COVID thing, absolutely. The airborne thing, absolutely. To me, that's just the other layer. But like, even if you just set that aside, I would make the exact same argument that California should be doing this, and they probably will in the future. It's just a matter of how long we have to go without it and who we have to drag kicking and screaming to just provide this. I mean, if you just imagine like the cost benefit analysis, if you just game it out in your brain with fires that are like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. I mean, there's 35 million people in the state of California. It's a big state, right? Lots of fires. If you follow this topic at all and you see like the smoke maps and everything, like a lot of people do, if you live here, you're just like, oh, a lot of people are impacted. Millions and millions of people. If you just gave them respirators, which there's literally no controversy, there's no debate. Like when it comes to breathing smoke, people are like, yeah, you put on a mask or
Yeah,
you're
but
an
Gavin
idiot.
Newsom wouldn't even wear one during the LA fires when he's sitting there in the heart of like smoke. I think we all need to just be real for a second. Your perspective as an educated person, my perspective as an educated person, both of us have decided to wear respirators, despite the fact that they're not the most comfortable thing in the whole wide world. We are a minority, and you have people like Gavin Newsom who wants to, calm people during a crisis and goes to the headquarters for all the smoke. He's standing in the Palisades around all this toxicity. And the EPA is now like testing
Mhm.
back when it happened, was testing the grounds to make sure that it was safe for people to move home. And he's standing there as these fires are smoldering on the ground, not wearing an N95, which is something that anyone who works in toxic environments should be wearing. It's wild to me. These firefighters, they're not getting appropriate respiratory protection when they're out in the field fighting fires.
That's true.
So that's a hazard of the job, and I suppose perhaps the governor thinks that's a hazard of the job for him too. But I'll tell you one thing, going to school, you shouldn't have to breathe that stuff. Your windows don't open because you're worried about, shooters, active shooters. You shouldn't have to worry about breathing other people's cooties all day long or breathing smoke from wildfire smoke. They should have those rooms on blast, clean air blast, portable air purifiers, built in HVAC. They should be following public health guidance.
Our jobs are to set our kids up for success. That's it. We're to protect them and set them up for success. School admins' jobs are to set our kids up for success. You know, does exposing them to airborne pathogens do that? I don't know. I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm just a dude trying to figure this out. But from where I sit, it looks like, that's not really setting them up for success.
Stanford's done a lot of really great work on that, and I could pull that up another time, but they've actually talked about the implications of wildfire smoke on children, and it's huge. Not only higher risk children like those with asthma, autism, ADHD, other neurological issues, but just in general, it's a horrible thing to be exposed to. And there's a reason why we stopped allowing people to smoke in certain spaces around children. I don't understand why we're allowing wildfire smoke to permeate. Everyone's always worried about the cost. Well, like I'm looking at this, school's saying it's too expensive. And I'm seeing this news, which I'll flip to right now. So Liesl McConchie, who is an amazing clean air advocate, tweeted this today. One of the many excuses schools use not to improve their indoor air quality is that it's too expensive. And yet, schools are bribing kids with money to come to school. But it's the Digital Pioneers Academy in Washington, D.C., is launching a pilot program to address chronic absenteeism by paying students $50 a week, their families $50 a week, to come to school. And this is just setting the absolute wrong incentives here. If your family's incentive is to get to work, to make the $50 a week because they think that means something to them, they're going to be sending those kids in who are sick, who are contagious, who are not well, which fuels more people sending their kids in who are sick, contagious, and not well. If you have $50 a week to encourage kids to come to school, you have the 4 cents a day to clean the air in your classroom per child. It literally costs less than a cup of coffee and a piece of cake per child per year to get CDPH level air quality in a classroom.
I personally don't know how she can write those things without using like 10 F bombs. So it must take a lot of energy on her part. I would imagine like if I had to write that, I'd need a nap afterwards, just editing all my F bombs out. So props on Liesel for managing to keep that clean. I I your point is great, which is that if a parent is choosing between like the $50 or their kid's sick, like they're and they need the $50, like you're basically spearheading a program that is guaranteeing super sick kids in school. So, like in terms of like second order effects, like that one was pretty predictable, I think. Um, I have to say I'm a little conflicted here. I do feel like um you know, paying people for work is good. I haven't really thought about this much, so I might change my mind in like 5 minutes. But like the idea of like paying people to go to school, I like that idea. Like I feel like people should be paid to go to college, so you're not starting off in debt. I think people should be paid to learn like trade skills and things like that, paid like internships and things like that. I'm a big fan of that. So on one hand, I think that's great. And I think if you had solved the infrastructure problem and that you are paying them also to have their kids not go when they're sick, I think would be really good. Of course, then they'd be paying them to stay home or go to school either way. So I don't know how you'd solve that, but I mean, I'd like to think that there's maybe a solution there, but definitely if you're in a situation where you're paying people to send their incredibly sick kids to school, that is going to be really bad for everybody. And in the context of them saying they don't have money to invest in what's good for kids when it's their job to find the money and lobby for the money and protect kids, is just like, I don't know how these people sleep at night, honestly. Like I know at a certain level they all pat themselves on the back and tell themselves they're doing a great job and all this stuff, but I just don't get it, like as a parent, yeah, like your job is to know. And yeah, you don't know all the time. And yeah, you fuck up and you have moments where you're like, I can't believe I didn't know that nobody told me and I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Like that happens as a parent a lot. And I've had those moments. I like to be on top of it, but sometimes I'm like, wow, I didn't know that I didn't know that. And that really sucks. And I may have made some bad decisions. And then I'm like, okay. And I'd like to think that like my development as a parent is somewhat anti-fragile to that like environment, which is that okay, well, let's take the case that there's more of those things. How can I like set things in place and improve myself and just try and be more proactive about these really important domains for my child? These just happen. It's part of being a human, it's part of being a parent, it's part of being just living in the world. But I think if your job is to protect students and set them up for success, like, holy fuck, 5 years into the most consequential airborne pandemic in modern human history, like, what the fuck are these people smoking? And then what's crazy is when you watch the UN talk and the lady from Boston is who got all the CO2 monitors in the schools and they're just kicking ass over there and who knows how they did it. But she must be reading this stuff and being like, what the fuck, people? Like, we just did it. Like, why can't you just do the thing? So I think what's like missing from a lot of these conversations is that nobody is a monolith, right? There's essentially a civil war within the medical community when it comes to COVID. Half of them are looking at their colleagues and being like, you people are fucking morons. It's airborne, it's killing people, they're getting sick. Just do the thing. Wear the mat, wear the respirators, don't infect your patients. And then the other half are like, whatever, like it's fine. There's a civil war going on. There's a civil war going on with school administrators, right? This is not talked about. Like there are those that look at this and be like, you people are nuts. You should be fired. You need to be replaced with people who actually will do what it takes, And so I think when I see these, it's just these untold stories, and I hope at some point we can maybe have some debates on here with like two school administrators, one of which was like, yeah, we just did the thing and we did it. And now our stats are this and we kick some ass. And then the other one's like, oh, well, we can't really do anything and it doesn't really matter. And we just have this debate here. We get them on camera. Let's just record it, So
This
I,
is
I
great.
I find this stuff enraging, but I also really think that like when that these civil wars, people don't like to talk about it. Doctors don't really like to talk a lot of shit about their colleagues, and so they keep it under wraps. They maybe keep the conversations private. But I think the more they surface these conversations like on X, where they're like, yeah, like, dude, you're nuts. Like, what are you doing? The more they hear that from their own colleagues and they start to get that pressure and really like the element of like social shaming is such a powerful biological mechanism that we have that to some degree, I know it sucks when you have it, but like it makes things work sometimes is it gets people to not do bad things. When you have your colleagues and like people you look up to and respect be like, dude, you need to get your act together or you need to go, you
I
know?
was I was actually talking to this amazing family medicine doctor who treats both adults and children in California, and she was explaining to me some of her concerns, what she's seeing in her practice, and she's genuinely very concerned about a lot of these kids' speech delays and other things that are on the rise. And she is trying to find ways to be more open about this publicly. And I really hope she's able to be successful with the full weight of the medical boards or medical communities behind her. The challenge that you have now is if you say something and you are part of a medical group, you have to be very careful about what you're saying publicly, because if it's not in conjunction with the or not in sync with what the professional organization that you are part of is saying, you can have repercussions. The good news is that this particular doctor shared with me that it sounds like some of these large organizations are starting to get behind this cause and realizing that we can't just sit back and hope this all works itself out. So I'm very hopeful. I'm also very hopeful about things like Clean Air Allies, which is the group that Liesl McConchie, who I mentioned earlier, has co-founded with another great lady from California. And they are really focused on the IAQ situation, the indoor air quality situation in California schools. And one of the things that I learned just the last couple of days in looking at what Liesl was tweeting is that they are soon launching a youth video contest with cash prizes. So I'm really hopeful that that starts to get that youth activism layer fired up, and the kids who really understand but have felt too much peer pressure to do anything about it, that they'll really start articulately speaking about what is concerning them.
I'm super excited about that, honestly. Like, I think there's going to be a tipping point when kids see that there's like some social clout for like doing this and, showing some leadership and just kind of like even just being rebels to some degree and going against the grain and being cool and organizing. You see that shift sometimes when things go from being not cool to cool. I've lived through a few of those shifts myself, just like culturally. And I think when you start to see there's a power there that people are just most people underestimate. I don't because I've done some work with youth climate activism and I've seen it firsthand. Like when these kids get fired up, I don't even call them kids, they're really just like young adults. They don't, they're not like childish. They're like incredibly sophisticated, incredibly competent, incredibly articulate, incredibly prepared, incredibly good at organizing, incredibly good at getting results. Um, Far outclassing most adults, honestly, in all of these categories. So I've seen that firsthand with my own eyes. I've followed historical just accounts of many many young people throughout history that have done incredible things by the time they were 14. Like just if you look for these stories you'd be like, oh yeah, no, like when you're get to the point 12, 13, 14, literally every culture throughout history is like you need to be a contribution to society, and we're like living in this bubble a couple hundred years of like you know kids have to be in school and they can't really contribute until they're 18 and all. It's just bullshit. Like the rest of the world throughout all of human history is like, oh yeah, when you get to this age, yeah, you're basically need to contribute. And that's what gives kids purpose. That's what gives them like they get welcomed into, they start adding value, by just keeping them out of this whole thing. It's so bad for everybody. So I have multiple reasons why I think this is great. And the life experience they get from that as being somebody in like middle school or high school who's organized mass protests and demonstrations and organized groups around the country and the world and like coordinated things. By the time you get to college, you're just a superpower. Like you have done so much crazy stuff, and you just put that on your resume. It's just like frankly like really, really cool. Just the amount of leadership, like people talk about leadership like all the time in like my job in my field, right? It's all about leadership and leadership vision. Well, guess what? You have 14-year-olds that have more leadership version than like VIPs, VPs in tech, you know, like straight up. And we're getting like crazier results, like organizing people around the country to show up at certain times and do these. You're just like, what the hell, man?
If you look what's happening with our government right now, it's being run by people who are nearing or should be in retirement, right? And so
Yeah.
kids don't understand that they have a role to play and that they have a voice people will listen to. And we really need to teach these kids how to advocate for themselves and to push the agenda that they know they're going to be left dealing with when they get to be the decision makers at a large scale.
Yeah, totally. So I'm definitely excited to see those video submissions. I think that's a great starting point for them. I think it's a really smart tact. Yeah, I think it's awesome. Well, we covered a lot today. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that I'm just really excited about the next coming weeks of this podcast, and there's going to be covering a lot of stuff. I want to talk a little bit more in the coming weeks about why people should care about this issue, pointing to some of the research that's been done and really digging into why this is so important for health and for our future economy, and how the costs really don't have it shouldn't be the blocker here.
Yeah, I think for me too personally is if you're watching this, if you're a parent, we're really talking to parents who are, motivated to protect their kids. And if you have questions that you feel like haven't been answered at this point, 5 years in, I'd love to know what those questions are. So you can leave a comment. We'll look at those questions. We'll answer those questions. And I'm a person who just picks up the phone and loves to talk to people and sort of just get a sense of where they're at. So if anybody wants to talk, I've got to set up like a Google Voice number or something, so I'm not just giving out my personal cell. But like, I am a big believer in connecting with people, like not face to face without a respirator, but like, having conversations with people, regardless of where they stand. If you think this is all like total BS or whatever, like honestly, I just want to talk and just see where your head's at. And, I really think there's a huge opportunity, even with people who disagree on 99% of everything. I'd like to think at the end of the day, we agree on protecting our kids and doing what's best for our kids. Just trying to figure out what kind of conversation structure looks like to make that happen. So yeah, I'm super excited where this is going. At first when we were doing this, I was like, well, not much is going to happen week to week, but it's like I feel like every week there's so much stuff happening that we kind of have to narrow it down to like 5 or 6 talking points, and things to react to. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about doing this. So yeah, hopefully let's keep it going.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and we're looking forward to doing it again next week.
Have a good week.